We've got more coordinator movement. Mike McDaniel's joining Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert. What a marriage that is. We've got information on the Buffalo Bills, tons of offensive and defensive coordinator searches, and Mel Kiper dropped his first mock draft on today's NFL Six-Pack.
This is Locked On's NFL Six-Pack. 6 bold takes from 2 guys who just flat out know football. NFL experts Matt Williamson and Brian Peacock bring pure NFL talk. Great takes, no fluff, just honest football talk. Crack one open. It's NFL Six-Pack on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the NFL Six-Pack. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thank you so much, everybody, for making us your first listen of the day. And thanks for making Locked On your number one sports podcast network. A ton to get into on today's program. And of course, as we kind of see every year, the team's seasons end, Matt, and head coaches get their interviews. And someone gets hired, and there's a rush to hire somebody, and then it slows down again. And that's where we're at right now. We're getting coordinator news midweek, as I think some of the teams that are taking this process slow are waiting for another group of coordinators that lose football games that they can interview for their head coach jobs. And so still numerous head coach positions open. We are seeing now some teams that do have head coaches adding their offensive and defensive coordinators. So there's a ton of news on that front. And Matt, let's kick this off with the biggest news of the day, which is Mike McDaniel, former Dolphins head coach, is now the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles for the Chargers. Mike McDaniel and Jim Harbaugh. I love this so much, Matt, because this is the most glorious combination of the 2 biggest weirdos in the entire NFL. And it is either going to be spectacular or it is going to be an entire debacle, because these 2 personalities, I don't see that it meshes well, to be honest with you, because I've seen Harbaugh, I've seen Mike McDaniel, both coached with the 49ers, and I covered them and followed them very closely. And they're both so different, and they're both so weird. Maybe it's just the perfect match in a yin and yang for Justin Herbert, but it could be absolutely a disaster as well. And I can't wait to see how it goes.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, these 2 I would never pair together. You know, if we're just like picking up teams, like who's a good running mate for the head coach or the offensive coordinator. But I'm sure that there is a massive amount of mutual respect for both, you know, through each set of eyes for what these guys do. I'm super intrigued, and we just recorded a Locked On Dynasty, and we talked about almost half the show was about this hiring from a fantasy perspective, because the personnel is so much different than what he had in Miami. You know, like they're not going to trade Omarion Hampton and Quentin Johnston, and you know they're going to roll with what they got. So he's going to have to do things differently. Now, you know, just from fantasy, we're like, I think it raises all ships. You know, first off, you get Slater and Alt back, so I don't care who the coordinator is. It's going to be better from that perspective and blocking. Right. You know, that's
Greg Roman. It was going to be better with both offensive tackles you lost last year.
Exactly. Now, I don't think all of a sudden they're going to try to implement what we saw in Miami. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of those motions, a lot of that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's going to be all speed. I mean, like Wig and I on Fridays, we kind of have this running joke about the Dolphins that they have too many Ferraris and not enough dump trucks. Well, they got a lot of dump trucks in LA.
That's the fascinating part of this. And Schwartz said that Jim Harbaugh wanted to marry some aspects of the Shanahan system with the passing game and the running game, and marry that with a philosophy that is offensive line first and heavier personnel, which is fascinating. And it's something, to be honest with you, I've kind of wanted to see more with the 49ers. One of the big topics we're talking about on Locked On 49ers is let's get some more offensive linemen in here so you can convert 1 yard against the Seahawks. You know what I mean? Like that's right. And so to see that come together with, by the way, full circle, the Tua versus Herbert draft, Mike McDaniel goes from Tua to Herbert now. In that 2020 draft class, right? Of quarterbacks. And so I can't wait to see what it looks like. The running game should probably be improved. The passing concepts, you're going to have motion, and you get sort of an old school, we're going to beat you up. We're built on the offensive line with the new school, motions everywhere, play fast. I think it's going to be really fun. I can't wait to see what it looks like and the personalities. Put them on Hard Knocks, please.
I'm not a foodie or anything, but I guess fusion's a big thing nowadays. And part of me feels like this is tacos with General Tso's chicken on it and spaghetti. You know, like,
I had some actually this week, which was awesome, which was marrying one of my favorites in ramen noodles with birria, which is, Mexican staple with this, wonderful meat and broth with the ramen noodles. Man, that's exactly what they needed. They had the stew already. You throw the ramen noodles with Mike McDaniel. You got a fusion. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's fascinating. And I think what I like about it is that, personalities aside, I love the idea of, well, what's the best thing that we have? And now let's go get the best of the other thing and add to it. It's genius. It's really smart. So if it works, I could see, Jim Harbaugh doesn't suffer fools. And it's not that Mike McDaniel is a fool, but he is weird. And I can see meetings with Mike McDaniel saying all this weird stuff and Jim Harbaugh being like, I don't understand what you're saying. Let's get to the football part of it. Like,
yeah.
The personalities is really
I'd love this.
Even more than what the offense could be with one of the top quarterbacks. And look, Herbert's running out of excuses too.
That too. Maybe this puts him over the top. Harbaugh forever said, my goal is to get Herbert in the Hall of Fame. I like that aspect of it. I wonder, they've had all these like defensive linemen turn fullbacks, the Matlocks and those guys. Are they going away? I mean, I don't really know. I'm interested.
I don't think so, because
I bet not.
It's the Shanahan tree is one of the few trees that still does utilize a fullback, and now that might be more of an H-back type.
I say the guys that can catch the ball though.
Football, you got to be able to catch. But yeah, having some heavier base personnel, I think, can be part of this.
Yeah, and so I am super intrigued. And the big conclusion I came to on Locked On Dynasty was I feel like McDaniel is such a good offensive mind that he was forced to coach with like one arm behind his back because Tua is so siloed in terms of how he has to play the position. Everything has to be first read, get it out quick, accurate, crossing route with speed, where now he gets, a quarterback that really can play it any way you want. We'll do some of that stuff, but we're also going to do 7-step drops,
Fascinating. I can't wait to see how this all turns out here. Next, let's talk about the Buffalo Bills, because Bills owner and GM Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane had a press conference, and there were some interesting results and probably answering some of our questions we had on why Brandon Beane came through this with a job and Sean McDermott did not in Buffalo. Other offensive, defensive coordinator news, and come on, it's always a glorious day when Mel Kiper drops his first mock draft of draft season. Next. Today's episode of NFL Six Pack is brought to you by Drip Drop. Kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, mood, all level up. But let's be real, plain water sometimes doesn't cut it. I've been doing some intermittent fasting, and you got to stay hydrated when you're doing this. Maybe you're just grinding hard in the gym, long days at work. You got to stay hydrated. Again, it's the easiest win. Stay consistent with your health goals, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. Think clearer, focus, better energy, elevated mood, and even that fresh skin glow. I'm still waiting for that. I'm still at the beginning of my Drip Drop journey, waiting for that skin glow. I don't know if you can see it yet. If you're watching on YouTube, Drip Drop's science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, over 90% of top college and pro sports teams, because it rehydrates faster and more effectively than water alone. And right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. This episode is also brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right. This is one where it's, look, the guy owns the team, but Brandon Beane needs to say, shut up, Terry. You're saying too much on mic. And really ownership of the Bills trying to, defend themselves and defend his GM. So I get it in a press conference on Wednesday. And so this is, there's a lot here because this is why you don't always get the full story and get the entire truth from GMs and head coaches. And that's where Coach Speaks exists, because I appreciate getting the dirt, but you probably shouldn't put the dirt out there. And Bills owner Terry Pegula and GM Brandon Beane, because we asked the question when Sean McDermott was fired, it's like, okay, well, why did Brandon Beane keep his job and Sean McDermott did not? And we kind of bring up the wide receiver position. And Terry interrupted Brandon Beane, who was about to answer a question, and he said, quote, that was Brandon being a team player, talking about drafting specifically Keon Coleman. He's taken heat over it. I'm here to tell you the true story. And basically, Coleman was not the first guy it wasn't the top guy on Brandon Beane's board, but the coaching staff wanted him, and Beane was a team player. Let the coaches have the guy they wanted. So if you want to give them crap for not having good receivers, blame the coaching staff who got fired and not the GM. What's interesting is they're interviewing the offensive coordinator, who I assume had some say in this, for their head coach job right now. Keon Coleman's still on the roster, Matt. So this is like, probably get him for a conditional 7th round pick at this point.
So a lot to unpack here. And as you can imagine, Monday was there was too much to talk about, because the championship game, the games win, as well as head coaches. And first off, I can understand moving on from McDermott. It's a lot like Harbaugh. Like, maybe when you've reached the ceiling, we're hitting our head on the ceiling. Okay, I can understand that argument. I can't imagine picking McDermott over Beane. I mean, to me, that is insanity to me. And I meant to say that yesterday. But maybe the owner's a little nuts, and they have not built a good roster at all outside the quarterback. If you go, I urge everyone to go to drafthistory.com. Look at the last 3 Bills drafts or so. There's very little to show for it. And that's what I was thinking, is like, are we just going to, kick Keon Coleman right in the face that he's a bust? He has no chance. How about you develop him or be nice to the guy? And so I pulled this up, and you'll remember it because it didn't, involve the Niners too, but they took Keon Coleman with the 33rd pick. It was the first pick of the 2nd round after the Thursday went over.
They traded down twice, by the way.
They traded down twice, but there were so many receivers in this neighborhood. I think they originally had the 28th pick, which was Xavier Worthy. The Chiefs moved up for Worthy. So then they ended up with the 32nd pick. They traded that one to the Panthers, and the Panthers took Leggett. And in the meantime, your Niners took Pearsall at 31. So Thursday ends, and the next 2 receiver, or the top receivers that were still available, were Coleman, who they took. McConkey went the next pick.
Who's now with Herbert, McDaniel, Harbaugh, who we just talked about. Which,
right, good point.
I'm drafting him in my fantasy leagues. I think that's going to be a nice fit in the slot, getting him open with McDaniel's offense. I think that's a nice fit.
And then Jalen Polk went 3 or 4 picks later, which he probably shouldn't have.
I don't know. Most of those guys shouldn't have. I think McConkey was right where he should have been.
Yeah.
Right now, there's been some injuries. He's a good player. Polk definitely was too high.
Worthy's even too high. Legette's too high.
Yeah,
Coleman's
sure.
too high. Yeah.
But
my point is, you had
in Buffalo, but still, that is not a done deal. Even though he had a nicer year in year 2 than he had year 1.
But my point is, and you kind of mentioned it too, is like you had multiple opportunities from multiple draft slots to take somebody different and not take Coleman.
Yeah, and this happens a lot, and I think you have to collaborate. And there has been this doesn't help the whispers about maybe not being the most likable guy either. Right. And then now you have like sort of coach and GM or owner and GM together, and they're against the coaching staff. Does this rub another candidate the wrong way going to Buffalo potentially? And so yeah, in a lot of ways, this is why you don't want to see how the sausage is made, because it just adds more questions. Ownership thought he was doing something, doing his guy a solid that was sitting next to him. He made his job harder by airing stuff, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian Daboll, should he return to the Buffalo Bills potentially? And we saw some of Josh Allen's development happen with Daboll there. It got Daboll a head coach job. But what's interesting is when you tie all of this together with Mike McDaniel, who I thought would have been a perfect fit to go somewhere with Robert Saleh if he wasn't going to be a head coach. He actually ended up in Los Angeles. If you remember the report about Robert Saleh and the Titans, one of the reasons why he got hired was that he had a very detailed offensive coordinator plan for all of the jobs, but it was different for every job and every quarterback.
Okay.
And we're seeing Brian Daboll as potentially a candidate for the offensive coordinator job there. So I wonder if he saw, well, look, this isn't the Shanahan offense quarterback, Cam Ward. And so maybe he's not going to go to that familiar tree.
Okay.
He's going to go elsewhere as his offensive coordinator, which would kind of make sense. And it's really interesting.
There was a report today, and this isn't really about like a news breaker, and I forget where it came from. I'd like to cite them. And so this isn't necessarily fact, folks, but it sounds as though several people have reported that Daboll will take the Titans offensive coordinator job, and he was offered the Eagles one. So he picked it over Philly. That in itself is pretty interesting to me. It's like, is there dysfunction in Philly? Because they have better players. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
If Daboll doesn't get the Bills head job, that he'll become the OC in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I can see trying to develop Cam Ward in a Josh Allen-like fashion, like he did in Buffalo way back when.
Well, if you remember way back, didn't Brian Daboll bench Jalen Hurts in the middle of a national championship game as OC of the Alabama Crimson?
Was that him?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Saban had to check off on that.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, but he had to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. What I had heard, and what's funny is, because my team is now in the coaching hunt, you hear all these rumors, and this guy's going to bring this dude with them. And like, Flores is, I think, even here in Pittsburgh right now on his second interview with the Steelers. That's a big thing going on right now, too. Like you mentioned that some of these teams are going to wait to see who gets eliminated, particularly the Rams guys. But a lot of teams like the Steelers right now are interviewing guys for the second time in person. They did a Zoom earlier. Now they're in Pittsburgh or whatever. But a lot of people told me that if they hire Flores or if somebody hires Flores, Daboll's his OC. They have this Patriot Belichick tie.
Yeah.
But like Daboll might be like, well, you might not get a job and you don't even have a contract now to be a defensive coordinator. I can't wait around for you, Brian. These spots are filling pretty quick,
Yeah. What's fascinating is Daboll gets a lot of credit for Josh Allen's development, but what about Daniel Jones' development? And he looks so much better after Daboll too. So
I know. I've also had many people tell me that Allen did way more work away from the facility to work on his mechanics and things of that nature.
I think it's pretty clear that Josh Allen was a unique situation, and you can't say that a coach is the one that made all that happen.
Me too.
That's internal in a lot of ways. I think we know a lot about that with a lot of these athletes. Speaking of Flores, it's an interesting one because he's getting head coach interviews, but he was a defensive coordinator, but he's also being talked about for a lot of defensive coordinator jobs that aren't Minnesota because his contract is up.
Yeah.
In Minnesota. So he's almost like a free agent where the Vikings, since his contract is up, can't say no to him taking another defensive coordinator job.
Oh, no, you can do whatever you want.
Otherwise, you would have to.
He can take a linebacker job if you want.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting one with Brian Flores kind of deciding, does he want to go back to Minnesota? Does he want to be a defensive coordinator somewhere else if he doesn't get one of these head coaching jobs?
So again, I'm going to spin it back to the Steelers, but I think this is true for the other remaining teams. You wonder if you could try to double dip. Like if you look at Vegas odds for the Steeler job, there's 3 guys, and then there's like the field is way behind them. It's Shula from the Rams. Now it's McCarthy, which he kind of came out of nowhere, and Flores. If you're the Steelers, could you be like, why don't I hire McCarthy and then hire Flores? Right.
You're interviewing potential coordinators and trying to see who jives, even though it's under the guise of a head coach interview. Or it really is a head coach interview, but it's like, hey, if we don't hire you, would you be interested in being a coordinator?
Yeah, you were here as linebacker coach. You had a good experience with the Steelers when nobody would take you. Tomlin took you. If you don't get a head job, you don't have a job. You're going to be a D coordinator somewhere. How about with Mike McCarthy for us? And then you can double dip, With
the way things went in Miami, I feel like ownership would be a little wary of hiring Flores.
I don't know that he's going to get a head job. I don't think he will.
All along, but he's getting a lot of interviews. He's obviously a really good defensive coach.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
A little prickly from what I understand. Yeah.
That just did not go well. And when you're like suing the team that hired you, the owners, there's not very many of them. They're probably like, yeah, I don't want that.
Right. Like it was a big deal when the Steelers brought him in as linebacker coach.
Although the Steelers are different, and the Steelers aren't going to be tanking anytime soon because that's not how they operate from ownership. Mm-hmm. You're probably like, yeah, you should have sued them because that was ridiculous what they were doing anyways. So anyway, on that note, could we see some other top coordinators have coordinator jobs on the move? We're talking Schwartz. What's going on with Matt Nagy? Eric Bieniemy now back to the Kansas City Chiefs, and Mel Kiper dropped his first mock. Some quick takeaways from that one because it is draft season for all but 4 teams in the NFL next. This episode of NFL Six Pack is brought to you by FanDuel, and we are in playoff mode at FanDuel every game day during the NFL playoffs, and there's not very many left, so you want to get involved. FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like. So instead of forcing you to bet something new, you can just add to the bigger play. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day to see what boosts you get and where you want to apply them. You make your picks, apply your profit boosts, and go after bigger payouts. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. If you've ever done hiring, you've probably hired someone that looked good on paper, but wasn't the right fit. You know how important that is if you have been someone who's been hiring and maybe got the wrong candidate. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. With Indeed, if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs post directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show get $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about it on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Okay. What's going on in Kansas City? Because Matt Nagy, it looked like, was going to get this Tennessee Titans head coach job. So they brought Eric Bieniemy back as offensive coordinator in Kansas City. You're like, that makes perfect sense. And then the Titans announced Robert Saleh as the head coach. Matt Nagy's sitting there without a job now. What's going on there?
So I threw this out. I'm hesitant to bring it up because he's an all-time great coach and he's very likable. I sense that Andy Reid's kind of losing his fastball. And I've thought that for a while, and that he doesn't give Kansas City as many schematic advantages on offense as he used to. I'm not saying he's getting complacent, but he could understand why he would if he is. I mean, he's a human being, and you can just lean on Mahomes. But Nagy leaves. He, like Flores, from what I understand, also is not under contract with anyone. So he's just a free agent right now.
Right.
And I think Kansas City released something along the lines of, we just assume Nagy's going to be a head coach somewhere, and so we're bringing back Eric. He's not going to be a coach. He's definitely not going to be a coach somewhere. Tennessee was his only chance.
Yeah, he's a pretty uninspiring candidate, I thought, for the Titans, too.
Yeah.
And they were going to have to settle on Nagy. And to be honest with you, the Kansas City offense got worse when Nagy came over. So I like the move for Kansas
every
City.
year. Right.
And I don't know what job fits for Nagy. He might have to come back to the Chiefs or somewhere else as like a quarterback coach or something.
Right. And I don't think adding Bieniemy is a needle mover for me. I don't think that's a very inspired hire. You're just bringing back another familiar face and
bring back Tyreek Hill too.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think some of this is true for, the Steelers that just had a long-term coach. I mean, Belichick at the end, where you just get too familiar and you just keep bringing back people and who's going to question the czar in the building, and, the fresh ideas and that are actually listened to might be really worthwhile in Kansas City right now, and I just don't see that.
There's another well-respected, very good defensive coordinator like Flores, Jim Schwartz, who has had a failed head coach opportunity and is now in the second interview process with the team that already employed him as defensive coordinator with the Cleveland Browns. I believe he also interviewed maybe with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right?
No, but I know he has interviewed around, but he's
somewhere else.
Yeah.
I feel like he's on that, and I've argued that Kyle Shanahan needs to go hard and go hire Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator, because Kyle Shanahan needs his Steve Spagnuolo like Andy Reid has, or his Vic Fangio, guy who's been in his 60s. Is teams always want to hire these young 30, early 40s head coaches, and the head coach track might have passed him by. Even though Steve Spagnuolo, one team always interviews him for head coach every year, but nobody ever hires him. I feel like Schwartz is going to be on that path, especially if he doesn't get the Browns job
for sure.
And even
Fangio is a perfect example. Just give me my Fangio and plug him in forever, and he can be Dick LeBeau, or
The 49ers have changed defense coordinators 3 times in a row now. They've had 3 one and dones because Salah's gone again, and so get that top defensive coordinator too, right? That's going to stick around for a long time.
Yeah,
and I'm sure Schwartz would like to go win instead of being in Cleveland. Now, being a head coach is being a head coach. But I feel like interviewing him because he's the kind of the reverse of what we're seeing with Flores and Nagy, whereas he's still under contract as defensive coordinator for the Browns. So the Browns, I feel like, are playing this on both sides, where they want to keep the defense good and change the offensive side of the things. But it's like, does that make sense? You already had Jim Schwartz and a good defense, and you're going to get rid of a 2-time coach of the year for like a coin flip of an OC to be Jim Schwartz's offensive coordinator and figure out the quarterback thing. Like that doesn't seem like a good process to being a better football team either.
No, and the Browns job's the worst one out there. You're not going to get the best candidate. You know what I mean?
Way too young. You have to go to the Davis Webb category.
That could be who you end up with, right? I mean, so since Schwartz took over as the Browns defensive coordinator, they're number one in defensive EPA and number 32 in offensive EPA. So I could see them wanting, let's just change one side of the ball, and Jim, maybe we'll give you a raise and call you assistant head coach or something.
Yeah.
But does he want to do that?
Well, they have to hire, if they hire a defensive coach, then he's for sure gone as head coach. If they fire an offensive coach, maybe you could convince him. But at the same time, I feel like it's less likely he'll want to do that, because he'll feel burned if he interviews for head coach and doesn't get it. And does he want to go somewhere and win? Or does he want to stay in Cleveland and not win? Because all Cleveland has done is not win.
Does not win. And basically, you're telling the new head coach, yes, we're going to hire you, but you're keeping Schwartz in place.
And the whole staff.
And the whole staff, right.
Buddies, right. And
right. That can be weird.
That could be, and you probably don't get it. Maybe someone's like, oh, good, this is a great job because I get Jim Schwartz in that defense. A lot of other coaches would be like, no, I want to run my own thing.
Yeah, and wouldn't you be frustrated? Like I always joke around here in Pittsburgh, like wouldn't you love to have a beer with Schwartz and Myles Garrett and be like, you guys have the best defense in the league since you got there and the worst offense. Isn't this getting a little frustrating? Like, yeah. It's getting frustrating.
Just a little bit frustrating.
Just a little bit frustrating, right? We're doing our job. You must be the other guy.
Last note here, and look, it's mock draft season. We're going to talk a lot of mock drafts. A couple of quick notes because Mel Kiper is the godfather. Speaking of losing his fastball, he might have lost his fastball a while ago. I love Mel Kiper. He's OG. And so we got to check in with.
I can't hear about Shedeur Sanders anymore from him.
Right. I
really can't.
And to be honest with you, seeing the national championship game, did that just solidify it even more? It's Fernando Mendoza, number one, all day, every day for the Las Vegas Raiders, as it is in this mock draft.
Yep. And I don't even know. It's going to be at every mock possible. There was an ESPN article yesterday where they asked GMs to make crazy predictions in the offseason. And one of them was Lamar Jackson could get traded to the Raiders for the first overall pick and something else, blah, blah, blah. That's like the only crazy thing where Mendoza to the Raiders at 1 gets shocked. And that's not going to happen either. You know,
that's out of control. That'd be insane. But you almost hope for that because draft season might get a little boring because
shake it up a little bit.
Insane.
But then we'll just be like the Ravens are taking Mendoza at 1.
The big question becomes, okay, well, who's the best non-quarterback? So who goes number 2 to the Jets? That's where the draft really starts then. Arvell Reese seems like he's the guy that is the most common name there. Super talented, sort of a hybrid edge guy. Does that fit the scheme there in New York? And is that the best guy for you that's not a Fernando Mendoza, not a quarterback in this draft, man?
I wonder if that's going to start to get super chalky too. I have a feeling it will because
especially if he blows up the combine, which he probably will.
He will, and he's really an edge rusher, but they have an LB next to his name. I mean, he's Micah Parsons is the obvious comparison because the problem with I get this way every year, but this one I'm not very excited about the top of this draft, and I don't think it's a particularly very good draft to be picking near the top. And the premium positions aren't really there either. You know, I mean, another quarterback. So, you know, some of the best guys are Downs, the safety at Ohio State. And
I think what you're going to end up seeing is there's a lot of good receivers and there's a lot of good offensive linemen and tackles. I think the tackles are going to rise, and that usually happens.
They will.
You're excited about the skill guys at this point in draft season. And then once it gets closer and closer, you realize, oh, Armand Membo is not going to be pick 25. He's going to be pick 6 or 7 or whatever it is. Right.
You nailed it. I think all those premium positions are going to keep getting driven up. But even though it does look like a good receiver draft, there's no one that resembles Jamar Chase to me.
No.
It's a good tackle draft, but there's not Joe Alt or Penei Sewell, you know, that are just, you know, my daughter could evaluate, you know.
And by the way, Ty Simpson ends up with the Jets' second pick at number 16 in this mock draft. I don't buy Ty Simpson as a first round pick, but you know, it's a quarterback needy league. So we'll see.
And there's gonna be a shortage.
That leads me to just the 2 last notes I have that I think are going to be 2 of the more interesting places. And especially now that we have head coaches in Tennessee who picks 4 and New York Giants who pick 5. I think a prospect that's going to rise, sort of similar to Arvell Reese, David Bailey, Texas Tech.
Yes.
Again, sort of a hybrid edge guy. He's an edge guy. He's listed as outside linebacker here. He has got a ton of juice. He's going to blow up the combine. He's on the Feldman Freaks list. He's all the way up to number 4 on this, and I've seen him in the teens, and he's not going to go in the teens probably with this class because, again, he's going to light everything up as far as athletically and a premium position as an edge guy. Is that what Robert Saleh would like, you know, next to Jeffrey Simmons on that defensive line? I like that pick, but I also like the next pick for them because they need a wide receiver. Carnell Tate goes to the Giants at number 5. I see that as a very common pick. I almost like I feel like that makes it too easy because the Giants don't need an edge guy, right? To give them wide receiver.
I see what you're saying.
I like
the old mock draft trick to make it fit, make the puzzles fit. Yeah.
You might like him in Tennessee as well, but the Titans are actually the first team where it starts to feel like, okay, you might be in a good spot because you can get probably a really good edge player here or maybe your pick of all the wide receivers.
Interesting. Yeah. And I do think it's kind of interesting now especially for this mock draft world, which really doesn't mean much, but the Titans and Giants now have a head coach and they have a quarterback, you know, so now they're not going to take either, you know, or they're not going to add either, you know.
Jeremiah Love getting really chalky with the Chiefs too at pick number 9.
That's going to get old too.
Yeah.
And it won't happen.
There you go. Let us know who is your team picking in the NFL draft. Who's your team hiring as a head coach? as an offensive or defensive coordinator. Get your questions in for tomorrow's mailbag at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL in the YouTube comments, and check out the Everydayers Club. You get an ad-free stream of this show, and you get an invite to the Discord server where we have all kinds of conversations about draft and the entire NFL. So check out the Everydayers Club, NFL6pack.supercast.com, or find the link in the show notes. Matt and I back tomorrow with your questions and topics on the NFL Six Pack.